Hi, it's Kreampuff. Welcome to my channel. It is fall everywhere, and I wanted to design something that could be used for Halloween and the fall decoration. Now, I live in a small apartment, so everything I have has to be multi-purpose. So what I came up with was these cute little pumpkins. They work perfect for Halloween, and they leave the holiday decoration untouched so that you can just continue to use them throughout the fall season. So if you will hold on for just a second, let me set everything up and we'll get started. Alright, let's get started. So I'm going to use the chubby pumpkin, and it measures about 3.5 inches tall. So I went and found a plate that's a little bit over double. I think that'll give us a good height since we're going to use half of it. This plate is 8 inches. I took and traced it onto a piece of freezer paper. I'm going to take the freezer paper and fold it into half, and then into quarters. Alright, that will give us a center point. I'm going to cut it in half. Now this will give you two pieces. We aren't going to use both pieces, but just in case something happens, you do have a backup, which I needed to use on the first one. So always good to have a backup plan. Alright, I've cut them in half. Now I'm going to take my ruler and find my 60-degree line on my ruler. I'm going to line that up on the half of my circle, and the other corner is going to go on the fold line that I created in the middle. Alright, there we go. Oops. A little bit of movement. And make the cut. This piece we will not need, but now we have our template for a cone. So I tried a 45-degree angle, and what it did is it ended up a lot wider at the base, and I didn't like that. I liked the taller cone. I am going to cut this out of material, and I will be right back. Okay, I want to show you a trick that I learned when I was making stained glass windows. I've cut the two straight edges out. Now I'm going to put the plate on it and line it all up with my edge. And what I learned it helped cutting circles out. And what you want to do is cut until it feels like the rotary blade is going away. And then just cut straight off of the material. Start back about 1/2 inch and come into your cut, and then when it feels like it's not following the bowl anymore, you can just run off the material. If you want to cut this with scissors, that's fine too. Some days I can't cut a circle. Today maybe is not one of them. Alright, so there we go. I have this taken care of. We only need one of these because this is our cone. I'm going to fold it in half, lining up these two edges. Alright, come on. There we go. And I'm going to sew a seam down the side with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I am going to start from the circle side, sewing towards the point, just in case I get a little bit of movement. It'll make the difference up here versus making this edge uneven. Okay. Alright, I've sewed my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and now I'm just going to cut off the tip and down a little bit. This will help create a nice flat seam. And then also on the bottom, I'm going to cut a little bit off. My thread. Sorry. If you don't know, this is one of the best tools. Having a lint roller on your table really quickly picks up all of the debris to keep your workspace clean. Now I'm not going to iron this. I found that when I ironed it, it created a flat spot on the opposite side. It was just a mess, so I decided I'm not going to iron these. I'm just gonna take, this is my seam ripper, get a nice point on it. Just keep working it until you get the point that you want. All right, that looks good. If necessary, go back, cut just a little bit more off, but I'm happy with that point. This is some leftover batting that I had from another project. I'm going to cut one small piece. I found it better to work with smaller pieces versus one bigger piece trying to manipulate it. So the first thing is just stuff it in and worry about the first ½ inch or so of the cone. Work it in there to get a nice point. Just maneuver it. May take you just a minute. I lost my point, so I am going to end up going back and trimming just a smidge more. I don't like how that looked. And I'm not going to cut my thread. Try this again. There we go, that lays a lot better. Okay, one little piece, worry only about that top ½ inch or so. And pack this one in there really well, because if it's loose, it'll fall out later. I had that happen when I was trying to sew the top on. All right. Now I also didn't stuff this all the way down. I found that when I tried to put it on the flat brim of the hat, it kept bouncing off and I had more problems. So I'm only going to stuff it about halfway down. And again, just pushing it in there, making sure that you have the point and the tip that you want on the cone. So set it down on the table. Some of mine ended up a little bit, they didn't want to sit flat, and this one does. So usually it's around the seam. Just take a little bit off. You don't need to take much off at all. Just a little bit to even that out. There we go. That sits a lot better. That will make it easier when you go to put on the brim. Okay, so what I did for the brim is I literally took this into the kitchen with me and tried on a bunch of sizes, trying to figure out which one would be the best, taking into consideration I'm going to lose a ½ inch in the seam allowance. The bowl that I did find worked the best is about 5 inches. So I'm going to take a piece of material and make sure that I can get 2. So 1, 2, I have enough there. I'm going to cut slightly over 5 inches. Going to fold it in half. There we go. Pin it together. Again, you can draw around it and cut it out. I'm going to do the method that I'm most comfortable with. Okay, so here is my circles cut out. As long as I'm at the cutting board, let's cut everything that I'm going to need. This is the thickest interfacing I could find in my house. Make sure that this piece is flat. If you have a wrinkle in it, it will show through the hat. I had a little bit of an issue there. Now, depending on how thick you want it, this is what this interfacing will look like. It's nice and firm and pretty straight. I also tried one. This is with some leftover cotton batting. It's an all-natural cotton batting, a little bit poofier, but took the top stitching well. And then this one is actually fusible fleece that I had, so it creates another little puff on the edge where you do the top stitching. So it is all personal preference. All right. So what I'm going to do now, this is the scary part, I'm going to cut about 1/4 of an inch off all the way around. You will now see why I use the other method, because as much as I can use a pair of scissors, this doesn't work out for me very often. The one thing that my grandmother did teach me was to use long strokes. So use the entire blade of your scissors and straight there. Okay, that actually turned out pretty good. Quite happy with that. Okay, so now I have my interfacing cut out. This is my right sides together brim. What I need to do is to mark this for an opening to turn my material around. I'm just going to put 2 pins in there to act as a start-stop. Now, if I was doing this on a straight line instead of a curve, I'd leave a much bigger opening, but I have a problem with getting this to fold correctly when it's on a curve. So I found I'd rather fiddle with it more when turning it out and have a smaller space to close versus leaving a bigger space and easier to turn. A couple of tricks that I have for sewing circles. One is to sew a nice even pace around your circle. Stop, starting, stop, starting, stopping, turning has a kind of creates a decagon or a octagon shape on your circle. So just go at a medium pace all the way around your circle will help you get a much nicer edge on it. Okay, I'm going to start sewing at the machine. I've got my machine set to 1/4 of an inch seam. And I also have shortened my stitch length to 2. It usually also makes it a little bit smoother when you're turning. So I'm going to do a couple of back stitches. Pull that out. And like I said, just keep going, don't stop, start. It makes a much smoother circle. And don't try to push it. I'm more guiding it with my left hand than I am with my right hand. Okay, here we go. It's pretty even all the way around. If I can find where I didn't. And then just start to turn it. Okay, I'm back. I have pressed all the way around. I have my opening closed. What I'm going to do now is take my interfacing and I'm just going to roll it into a little strip here. Just rolling it up, making sure that it will fit into my opening. Put it into the opening. Tuck it in. You can hear it, it just released, and just work it until it is flat. Now what I'm going to do is take one of my fold overs and I'm going to fold it over the white interfacing just to hide it. If you want, you can take a Sharpie and color it in so that you don't see any of it. I just usually just fold it over. Alright, come on. Alright, that didn't work. Let's try the other side. So I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to stitch as close as possible to the edge of this circle all the way around, and in the process I will close up my turning hole. Let me take care of that and I'll be right back. Alright, here is my finished brim. I've closed up my turning hole and I think it looks pretty good. I'm going to take my little cone, put it on top of there, turn it around. So I think we look pretty good there. So one issue that I did have is trying to get it over the stem. So I tried cutting a circle in here. It didn't seem to work because it slid all over the place and I just didn't like that. You could do that, cut a hole and then maybe put like some glue dots on it and stick it to the top here, but you'd run the risk of peeling off your paint. So I didn't want to do that. So what I decided to do was to make a buttonhole. And I'm not going to pull out the button foot or anything like that, but I am going to just satin stitch in a square to form, and then cut out the middle to form my square. This way I have a little bit more control over it versus trying to cut a big hole. So all I'm going to do is just put my pins in a square. Doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to be looking at the underside. This will be hidden by our cone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my machine to a small satin stitch. And I'm just going to use my pins as a point of reference. I'm going to start here, probably somewhere in here. So down, over, across, and up. I'm going to snip this and cut out the inside of the hole. So let me go to the sewing machine. Again, small satin stitch all the way around, just turn, just leave your needle down, pick your foot up, turn your piece, sew down your side, leave your needle in, pick your foot up, turn until you make it all the way around. I'm going to go do that and then I will be back. Okay, here is our brim. As you can see, I just did a satin stitch all the way around in a square. Now take into consideration the type of stem you have. Every pumpkin has a different stem on it. So you may want something that's a little bit wider, oblong. Just make a decision on what best suits the pumpkin that you have. So I'm going to fold it in half, cut down the inside, and I'm going to cut corner to corner to just cut this out. Just take a minute, make it look nice. Alright, now finishing this, I want to double check, make sure it sits the way that I want. I'm happy with this. Looks good. Now finishing connecting the brim and the cone, there's a couple different ways that you could do it depending on what you have on hand. I took the smallest bias tape maker that I had. I've never used it before. It's the only one in my collection I hadn't used. But this takes a 1/2 inch strip I used that on this one. The orange is actually a bias strip that I glued onto the cone, and then I glued it onto the brim. I also did the same on this one. On this one, I had a piece of felt that I'm going to use for some pumpkin faces that had a sticky material on it. So I just stuck it to the brim, and then I did a quick stitch around to sew it down flat. If you have rickrack or a gross grain ribbon or anything to create a little band, it'll work. For this one, I went ahead and I wanted a nice pop of color, and I made an orange bias tape. So what I'm going to do on this one is I'm actually going to sew it with just a single stitch onto, or with a zigzag stitch, I'm sorry, onto the cone, and then I'll glue it onto here. So let me do that and I will be right back. Alright, here is the latest witch to add to the collection. I think they would all look great around a cauldron of candy, and once the Halloween season is over, you can remove their hats and continue to use them for the fall season. If you like this video, please press and steam the subscribe button. This is Kreampuff. I'll see you later.